Bitcoin is a fascinating technological breakthrough phenomenon, is always running, and it's much like astrology in this sense because the sky is always moving, it never stops, and we generate data for placements of the planets, much like the Bitcoin network is constantly generating transactions, and then exchanges generate prices. So we're going to look at this video about the synergy between the two things, between Bitcoin and astrology, and how we can use the former to help us grow in our understanding of the latter and become better astrologers. The first thing I just want to point out in this video, I'm using Bitcoin, and so it's invented by Satoshi Nakamoto, who is, we don't really even know who that is. It's a group of people, likely. So invented in 2008, but first used in 2009. And right away, I want to say in this video, while I'm a fan of Bitcoin, I do find it to be quite promising. I'm aware that there's large debates about it, and many people deride it, decry it, think it is basically evil, while others think it's a savior, right? And so the purpose of this video really isn't to engage in those debates at all. It's to extract a component of Bitcoin and help us with our astrology, help us understand astrology vis-a-vis a very unique technology, unique because it's ever-present, much like the ephemerides are mapping things in their ever-present changeability. So too the price of Bitcoin is ever-present and always changing. If you hate Bitcoin, I think you can still get something out of this video. If you love Bitcoin, I think you certainly will get something out of the video. And if you love astrology, you'll also get something out of the video. So let's start and just define Bitcoin. This is from Bitcoin Magazine. I love the magazine, high quality articles, very intelligent people. This is from an article on their website. I just accessed it, but it was published June 27th, called What is Bitcoin? And in the article, they just define it right here in the first paragraph, right at the beginning here. Bitcoin is an electronic peer-to-peer cash system based on a distributed digital ledger called a blockchain or time chain. And that's key for the connection I want to make. The main point of this video is that Bitcoin is a time chain. It maps through a ledger the transactions that have taken place at any moment of time. So it's a map of time in terms of the exchange of these coins as they get sent to different addresses. And so keep that in mind. One synonym for the Bitcoin network is a time chain, right? It relies on a time chain. The article continues, the ledger includes transactions approved by the peer-to-peer network instead of a central authority. That's another key point, that it's a chain that maps transactions over time, so a time chain, and that it's decentralized. No one owns it. And these 2 points are how I want to get into the video because we have direct analogs in our astrology. One, no one owns the sky. Any person in the world, if they are sighted and can look up and see, can take in the moon and the sun and the stars. You learn some basic mathematics. Any person in the world can map those positions. If you can read, any person in the world can hold an ephemeris and look at the ledger, right? An ephemeris is a list of placements through time. It's kind of a time chain, isn't it, in a way? And so in this sense, you have this analogy between Bitcoin and astrology because it is a map of time using data contained in a ledger, and it's decentralized. Anybody can access it. So the Bitcoin network has been functional for 99.98756% of the time since its inception in January 2009. Less than 1 hour when this network hasn't been operating. And those were early in the life of Bitcoin, early in the life of the networks of computers, or the network of computers that maintains the ledger, the peer-to-peer network of computers. Since 2013, there has been no downtime. It's ever present, just like the sky. The sky is always moving. It's never goes away. You can't turn off the sky. And then the second point is that the trading in Bitcoin, so exchanges that trade Bitcoin, they operate 24/7. So they're always on. That is to say, there's a number in US dollars for the price of Bitcoin that's being generated every second. Much like the sky is always on, it's constantly changing. Every second, the ascendant degree changes, the moon changes, There's no two moments in history with the exact same placements. You can never repeat a natal chart, to our knowledge, according to the ephemerides we have and have been able to map. So I want to just pause here. This is why I think Bitcoin and the price of Bitcoin is a unique example to study astrology, because we have for every second a number. Most other things don't get a number every second, and nothing of this volume, global trading volume, most other financial instruments, or all of them, are closing on the weekends. So there's not this ever-present digit that's produced that you can then map and then compare to the ever-present changing map of the sky, of the ephemeris. And so it's this beautiful kind of example for how we can bring it into the astrology then and study, see what we can learn about our astrology, what we can learn about Bitcoin through the astrology. I do think there's something fundamental when we talk about money or a unit of exchange and account, something fundamental to our humanity, much like time or the planets or this mapping, these ledgers. In fact, in Sumeria, when they found the Sumerian tablets, a lot of those tablets were simply accounting. 10 bushels here, 12 bushels here, and then a few of them were astrology too, where they would talk about omenology. The king would see the eclipse, and this would foretell something or other based on the omens of an eclipse, for example. It was money and the sky that they were mapping with the tool of writing as it became invented. So we're dealing with some real fundamental and foundational forces here. So let's just shift here to the rest of the video. I want to take a quick look at the data. You get an amount that's assigned to the price of Bitcoin every second, and then we have the ephemeris that changes every second. And when you look at the data by just sun sign, so what happens to the price of Bitcoin when the sun is in a sign of the zodiac? And when does it gain the most? When does it decrease the most through the course of that solar transit? Over the course of the last 1, 3, and 5 years, it's Libra and Leo are the two signs that are the strongest for Bitcoin consistently. And then I want to look at the moon signs, because you can also just map with the moon. When the moon is in a zodiac sign, what happens to the price of Bitcoin? With the moon, it's again Libra and then Aquarius. So that Leo-Aquarius axis seems to be important, and then Libra in terms of being a real benefit to the price of Bitcoin. And so we have the idea of good or positive change happening when you have transits by the sun or moon to that sign Libra or that Leo Aquarius axis. And so we can just peek into the Bitcoin nativity. That's the thing about the time chain, the blockchain, right? It has the exact moment when the first Bitcoin was mined, the Genesis block, they call it. It's thought to be London. That's a separate issue, but I use the London chart. I find it to be useful. There's some real markers of why London is probably the best location embedded within the blockchain as well, but I'll set that aside. But in the London chart, the first house and the seventh house, so the ascendant-descendant axis, are comprised of Leo, where the ascendant is, and then Aquarius, where that descendant is. So right away you can see the moon sign, where you had rises in the price when the moon is in Aquarius, is the descendant. You have the sun in Leo also with rises in the price. So that's the first seventh house, one of the most important axes in astrology. And then what about Libra? Both transits by the sun and moon increase the price. Well, I think it's a great example of something called the lot of spirit. Powerful point in astrology. And Bitcoin, there's nothing in Libra in the Bitcoin chart, but for the lot of spirit in the London chart. What is the lot of spirit? Well, I like this website, 7starsastrology.com. He's got some wonderful articles here, but there's an article about the lot of spirit. He quotes Valens, and he says here, we find that Valens associates the lot of spirit with mental and spiritual as well as social exchange. Again, what is Bitcoin for? It's a medium of exchange and a unit of account and a decentralized peer-to-peer network. So that lot of spirit represents the idea of exchanging socially. And it's thought to be quite auspicious, especially when, or as he's quoting Vedius Valens in this article, and Valens says you need to check the places and the signs which the house rulers are located, so of the lot of spirit. And that's when it gets interesting with the Bitcoin chart, because you bring the Bitcoin chart up. The ruling planet of Libra is Venus, and Venus is exalted in Pisces, a quite strong Venus in its own Egyptian term and its sign of exaltation, right, in the Bitcoin chart. In the 8th house of shared resources and assets, it's a money house. And the Bitcoin chart is a night chart, which means the sun is below the horizon, so Venus has even more of a special feature. You might say the strongest planet in the whole of the chart is Venus, ruling that lot of spirit. And so it would explain, the sun comes through Libra, you get increases in the price. The moon comes through Libra, you get increases in the price. So it's a very sweet example of how the lots can be so telling, and particularly the lot of spirit. And it helps us learn about the data that we have, this unique technology that spits out data every second, and we can compare with our ephemeris. And then the final thing I'll just say, I've got a video of this channel all about the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius on the winter solstice and what that ushers in terms of that technological age. We're now in an age of air, some would say an age of Aquarius. And it's all about technology, which is what Aquarius can be. It's a sign of technology. But Jupiter and Saturn conjoined in that very first degree of Aquarius, right near the Bitcoin Mercury in Aquarius. Mercury is a planet of trade and money. And so you have the great conjunction right on this Bitcoin Mercury and that strong 7 Taurus. I think Bitcoin will continue to play an important role in our society because of this transit and the symbolism here. And keep in mind that Libra is such a strong sign for Bitcoin. Look to transits in Libra. Look to air sign transits. Jupiter in Aquarius was very good for Bitcoin in 2021. So that's the video, and I hope you've learn something maybe about the lots, and you can appreciate or maybe stand in awe a little bit of just how this technology that spits out a number every second can teach us about how astrology works in terms of having a numeric representation for the transits that the chart of this technology experiences. So take care.